Hello. Okay. It was a long flight. I would like to thank the organizers for bringing me out here and the sponsors as well. I spent a lot of time on this artwork over here. And then I saw that they're doing this screensaver in between. So, anyhow, it's kind of a brain thing, you know, the inside of a brain. Okay, let's go. First of all, the tools. I will be discussing a whole lot of different tools today. All of the tools that you're going to see here is free for download. At the end of the presentation, I will give you a list of URLs where you can download these tools. Again, there's a standard disclaimer. If you use this against any targets that you do not have a mandate to operate on, then we don't take any responsibility for that, right? I think that goes without saying, but I have to say it. So, just a quick thing. This is the agenda. I'm going to really quickly talk about SensePost. The marketing guys back home, tells me that I have to do this, but I'm going to keep it, 2 or 3 sentences. We're going to look at an introduction, why we look at these things, why these things are interesting for us at all. We're going to look at network application level testing, where I'm going to show you the tool called Wecto. Can I just see a show of hands? Who's played with Wecto before? Okay, only those 3 guys there. Seems they've got a little Wecto nest there. And then we're also going to look at application level testing. 2 tools that we're going to look over there. There's a tool called Crowbar and a tool called EOR. And I'm going to hopefully be able to show you some demos of that as well. I've got a connection to the internet here. I've got a target locally as a VMware machine. So hopefully we'll have the time to go through a little bit of playing with the tools. We can try to do that while I'm talking, but I suspect that we're going to run out of time. I think we're behind schedule a little bit already, and that's going to go into your lunchtime. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe some of the stuff I can show real quick. And then we'll do a conclusion and some questions. So this is basically what we're in for the next couple of minutes. Okay, you will see that I don't even have a slide that says Introduction to SensePost, so I'll quickly talk about it. We're a company in South Africa. We started in 2000. We're now about 15 people in the company. We're not a large company. We try to focus on quality rather than quantity. We do assessments, we do training, and we do research and consulting. So on an assessment side, most of the time we look at perimeter security, assessing perimeter security, and assessing web application security. Okay, that was the introduction to SensePost. Introduction to this talk, basically, if you're looking into breaking into a network or securing a network at the other side of the spectrum, there's a couple of things that you want to look at, right? First of all is finding the network. So you would see that SensePost spend a lot of time on doing footprints of networks, doing footprints of large organizations. You can then go one level up and look at the network level. That's basically finding out what services are exposed. When you're looking external to networks these days, you would find that there's not a lot of there's not a big attack surface to attack against. So you mostly look at port 80, 443, and port 25. There's not a lot more exposed in large corporates these days from the internet footprint. We can then move one level up to the network application level. And that basically sits, for me, anything between the network level and the application level. So this is where we look at patches and that kind of thing, but we'll go into that a little bit more in detail. And then you can also go one level up from that, where you go into the application level. And this is really where stuff is starting to get interesting these days. I think it's the new frontier for a lot of the problems that we see, and a lot of the attack vectors nowadays actually happens on application level. So in the talk, we'll spend a fair amount of time on the application level itself. You can go higher than that, of course, and look at content level look at worms, viruses, trojans, that kind of thing. And also look at some of the other vectors into a network, which could be wireless, third-party connections to other networks, RAS networks, social engineering, physical access, all of that. But we're not going to spend time on that today. So, why do we actually worry about these things? On a network level, finding the network is really one of the most important tasks. There's a way of saying we rather find the vulnerability on one machine than finding, basically doing a scan of the entire network and finding a vulnerability somewhere than trying to find a specific vulnerability on one machine, right? And many of these companies have very large networks that are span across the whole globe. They have multiple ISPs, which means they have multiple entry points into the internet. They have thousands of domains in multiple countries. It's controlled by different groups of people speaking different languages in different time zones. And in many, many cases, the organization itself doesn't actually even have an idea of what they have exposed to the internet. Okay. Now, we have a tool that's called, that we released at Black Hat 2005 in Las Vegas this year, called BDBlah. The URL is there on the board, on the screen. If you want to look at finding networks and finding net blocks and vulnerabilities within machines, I suggest you look there. I'm not going to talk about it today simply because we don't have the time to look at everything, right? Then on the network application level, that's really the patching game, right? That's, do you have all the necessary updates installed? Do you have the patches installed? That kind of thing. I think everybody is quite comfortable with how that works and how that sits together and what kind of problems we're looking at there, right? On application levels, things start to become a little bit more interesting because normally, in a normal sense, normally you have a security officer that is used to set firewall rules and that is used to apply patches on machines. But on application level, the problem lies with the developers of that particular application. So it's suddenly a whole different crowd of people that you're dealing with if you want to fix something on the application level. Okay? And most of the time, people that code web applications are not that security aware. They come from a developer background, they don't come from a security background, right? So the problem is really difficult to solve. You find that the people that defend networks, typically the guys that apply patches and on a network level work with a firewall, don't have a development background. And a lot of the time, these two groups of people are also not very comfortable with each other as such. So it's really a difficult situation. We find that nowadays, and it's changing, okay, it's changing all the time, but the skill level of attackers against application, against web applications, or even thick apps, are higher than the defending capabilities of that of developers, which is a tricky situation. The other thing that's also difficult to determine is if your app is really broken or not. So you have a situation where you have a customized application that runs on a web server, and there's no notification coming out from Microsoft or Sun or whoever saying there's a problem with this particular version of your application, correct? We can't get an alert for that because it's a custom built application. That makes it very difficult to work and basically determine if your applications are broken. It makes it a very difficult space for companies to defend. Now, in this talk, we're going to focus on basically those two ports. Like I said, if you look at a company externally, you'd find that most of the time you have port 80, 443, and 25 open. So for now, we're going to focus on port 80 and 443. Now, 443 is not really much different than 80. It's HTTP versus HTTPS, and with HTTPS we're only having SSL on top of HTTP. So all of the tools that I will be discussing in this talk now have SSL support built into it. Normally you had to put it through a proxy, a SSL proxy, but we have support now for SSL within the tool itself. Now, on a network application level, we really look here at a family of attacks that's called CGI scripts, right? So a lot of the tools out there, Nessus, Nikto, those kind of things, basically look for scripts and basically look for certain pieces of scripts that are sitting on the web server itself. Remember, this is not on application level. This is still on a network application level. Okay, so they look for sample scripts for interesting files. They look for encoding problems, sanitization problems within known applications. And they might look for cross-site scripting within known applications as well. This is all known applications, sample applications, that kind of thing. And basically, what happens is the scanner would send a request for this particular resource and determine if it's there. And if it's there, it would tell you showcode.asp is on your machine. You should look at it. On the non-commercial side, the players in this there's only really two scanners. There's Nikto that is using RFP libWhisker, and there's Nessus, right? Those are the two main competitors for this space. Now, the problem with almost all of the scanners that's out there is that there's a couple of things that they really do well. So, for instance, they don't really intelligently look at responses. Okay, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit more. They also don't do initial CGI directory mining. A lot of the scanners out there before it starts, have to determine what the CGI directories are, what directories on the server is marked as executable. And if you don't have those, you could miss a lot. They also don't do recursive scans for directories. So for instance, it would scan for a directory called admin, but it won't look in that directory admin if there's other directories available there as well. The result of this is that we miss a whole lot of stuff. We get loads and loads of false positives depending on the application, depending on the web server. And generally speaking, nowadays it becomes harder and harder to actually perform this kind of scan. So let's look at it in a little bit more detail. Remember, when you send a HTTP request, there are HTTP replies coming back, and that HTTP reply has a status code, right? So you know 404 means the file is not found. You know 200 means the file is there, so forth and so on. Now, web servers can be configured to reply with what friendly. Now, what is a 404? A friendly 404 basically means that we get a response back from the server saying that the location is incorrect or that the resource cannot be found. But it's not marked with a status code of 404. It's marked with the status code of 200. Right? You've seen this before, right? You browse somewhere, I think Yahoo, those kind of places. You get a page coming back that's a really friendly message that says, you know, the file is not here. I'm very sorry. But that response code that is coming back not with the 404. It might be coming back with the 302. It might be coming back with something else, but it's not coming back with the 404. And this we call a friendly 404. Okay. Now the problem with this is when we test something, we test if we want to see if that resource is there, and we get a response back with a 200, not with a 404, correct? And now what you get is that the scanner thinks that everything that it's testing for is on the machine that it's testing. So I don't know how many of you are using Nikto. Can I see show of hands who's using Nikto or you used it before? Some people? Yes? Okay. You know that message over there that says over 30 moved messages. This might be a byproduct of the server answering all requests of 302s or 301s. Moved message. You should manually verify results, which means you can't really do the scan. Right? Now, if you look even in more detail, and you look into the Nikto database, you would see I'm listing two entries there. If you look at those two entries, the first entry is basically looking for the directory called cpanel, right? And it will trigger a positive when HTTP 200 is returned. So that's what it's looking for there. Okay, and that's the response